If you're a business owner in really any industry and you're just looking to use AI to be more productive, make more money, be more efficient, look at it as being one of the best assistants you possibly could have standing next to you. When AI first started to make it onto the social landscape, let's call it, around 2020, it was smart, but it was clunky. It has now taught itself quite a bit. And I actually just read an article that said AI has now become smarter than the smartest person that's ever lived. And so when you're asking it a question, you now have the confidence to know that it's actually going to be returning information to you that can be valuable.
This is the Entrepreneurs United podcast with your hosts, John St. Pierre and Rich Hoffman.
Hey entrepreneurs, today we're sitting down with Joe Fiore. Joe is a vice president at the Zucker Institute. He's also an adjunct professor at Charleston College, teaching, I believe, Joe, AI. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. That's a topic that a lot of our entrepreneurs are dying to know a little bit more about. Can you give us maybe a little bit of how did you come to be a professor in artificial intelligence when artificial intelligence is, just most people just actually started last year? I know it started a lot more before. It was invented a lot more before last year, but how did you come to become an expert in that where you're now a professor in that subject?
It is a great story to share. Entire career was actually based in real estate, believe it or not. And I was lucky enough to have had multiple startups and successful exits from those startups, all related to real estate. As my life continued to evolve and I had two children who are now 2 and 5, my life changed, as I'm sure many of you can understand and relate to. And I decided it was time to make a change. Took a break, exited from all of my startups in real estate. And to make a long story short, MUSC, Medical University of South Carolina, came calling. I was as dumbfounded as you probably are asking the question, wondering why would a hospital research institution involved in the life sciences want anything to do with a real estate guy? And the reason was obvious after hearing it. It was simply because we needed to support the incredible inventors and researchers that were coming out of MUSC and the ideas that they had. Many times when you talk to a researcher who has a phenomenal idea and you begin to talk about pro formas or business plans, you get deer in the headlights. And it's at no fault of their own. It would be the same as asking a painter to do an electrician's job. And so what my role primarily is at MUSC is to help support these great researchers to flush out their idea, find out why they shouldn't move forward with it before they just start building it. As that process had built and as I was creating my career here at the Zucker Institute, my interaction with local universities that surround us, that being the College of Charleston, was one. And I started to talk with the students, the professors, the professionals there. Did minor speaking engagements. And one day they asked, "Hey, Joe, you're seeing AI at the forefront before it's even patented. You're reviewing the idea. How would you feel about coming to teach this topic that has now become something very important to us?" And so here I sit doing this dual service to the community at the Zucker Institute as well as College of Charleston.
I'd love to know more on the AI side. We've heard really often that how people prompt AI and how you get the best out of it is really important. Can you give a couple of tips on that, on how do you prompt it best? And if you were going to do a training class, hey, here are the top 3 tips on prompts to make sure you're getting what you desire back in the best way possible.
It's a great question. It's something that I actually addressed with my class just last night. The baseline best first place to start. Number one, pick your poison is what I call it. Pick which tool you're going to utilize. There's many out there. They're all great in different ways, but there is a formula that I suggest. It's not the end all be all, but I would always recommend using a 3-pronged approach, and that being act as, and that's instructing the tool to act as. And that could be a realtor, act as a scientist, act as a professional in really any industry. From there, the second leg is to make the product. So act as a realtor and make me a list of buying decisions. And the final piece to that is in what capacity. So when I say that, what I mean is, do you want it to be done aggressively, calmly, friendly? Really any adjective you could drop and insert there. So if you use that 3-pronged approach, act as, create, and in what form, it's really a good baseline for the AI tool to give you the proper feedback. And from there, the second biggest piece of advice that I could offer up is to be conversational. What it spits out is not the end all be all. It's there to please you. AI models are literally there to give you the best answer that they can. And so you can converse with it. The good example of that is saying, I like what you did on point number one, but could you elaborate a little bit more and make point number two a little more aggressive? So that would be where I would begin.
Can you give examples of that formula of act as, making the product, and what capacity? Can you give maybe 2 examples of that?
Yeah, the realtor one came up last night, and it's a really good way if you're a first time home buyer, have no idea what you're doing. You can go to an AI tool and instruct it to act as a realtor, create me a list of items that I need to be aware of, and do it in a way that is easy for me to understand. And that right there should give you a list that's pretty easy to follow to figure out what steps you need to be taking as a first time home buyer. So I'd say that would probably be a good example. Number two, I can relate to what I do on a daily basis for my profession in the science world. And I use this often. I am not a scientist. And so I many times use this prompt to help me understand what our incredible researchers are coming up with. And so, for example, I will instruct the tool to act as a scientist, explain what this molecule is, and do it in a way that I can understand it as if I were a third grader.
Love it.
And that generally works well for me.
That's excellent. Question for you on the whole fear of AI taking over the world. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's just that. I think it's a fear, and I believe fear stems from the unknown. And so my response generally to that question is we don't need to fear. What we need to do is understand. We need to understand how AI is working and what it can do rather than assume and be afraid of it. I think this is a representation of our society and movies. If you look back and you look at the last 10 years of movies being made, there has been probably more than you could realize that touch on AI, and they just scare people. It's all about robots coming in and taking over. If you look back historically in our country, let's even call it the world, anytime a new innovation has come, it has scared people. Has it ended the world? Has it come to our demise? No, I don't anticipate that happening with AI. I actually believe once everyone understands what it is and how to use it, we'll actually just adjust and start just becoming more productive.
Will AI become self-aware?
That's a question that actually comes up quite a bit. Not so much self-aware. What I actually believe is going to happen is instances will be able to communicate with each other. And that's about the extent of aware. And when I say that, what I mean is, for example, I have a ChatGPT account and it knows a lot about me because it's collecting my data. It knows a lot about me because I ask it a lot of questions and give it information about myself. One day in the not too distant future, and I know this to be a fact, my instance, let's call it, of ChatGPT will be able to communicate with someone else's instance. So if I'm going to give you a realistic example, I could say to ChatGPT, find a good time for me to meet with Laura, find a place that we both like and a time that's suitable. And without me having to do any more than that, I'll see an event in my calendar the next day. And that's because my instance is talking to her instance. So while it seems like it's self-aware, it's not. What it's actually just doing is its job is taking data and applying it.
So, of course, the average entrepreneur wants to be more productive. They want to spend less money. They want to be more productive. They'd like to reduce expenses. What's the best way for an entrepreneur to get started with AI?
The best way is to first understand whether you're building an AI company or using AI to operate your company. Those are two very different things. And we get this quite often in my profession. If you're creating AI, what you're doing is creating a large or learning language model. Those words are synonymous, LLM for short. What that is the secret sauce. If you're trying to create an actual AI tool, what you need is secret and proprietary information that others want to tap into. So that's one piece of it. If you're a business owner in really any industry and you're just looking to use AI to be more productive, make more money, be more efficient, look at it as being one of the best assistants you possibly could have standing next to you. When AI first started to make it onto the social landscape, let's call it, around 2020, it was smart, but it was clunky. It has now taught itself quite a bit. And I actually just read an article that said AI has now become smarter than the smartest person that's ever lived. And so when you're asking it a question, you now have the confidence to know that it's actually going to be returning information to you that can be valuable. When I say that, writing a business plan. If you are a business owner, you're trying to figure out your landscape. It used to take me as an entrepreneur 6 to 8 weeks to figure out my demographics. What's my TAM? What's my SAM? How many people could actually buy it? Can it even be built? What does the market look like? And now, with the click of a button using an AI tool, you can obtain almost all of that information in seconds. And so, what I would instruct entrepreneurs to do is use the tool to your advantage to gain knowledge that otherwise would have taken you weeks, months, if not years.
Obviously, entrepreneurs listening to this mostly fit into category number two, right? How can I use AI to make my company more efficient, more productive? And certainly part of the role of a CEO or an entrepreneur is how can I, drive more margin to my business, whether that be bottom line margin, gross margin, whatever it may be. And the way to do that is to be more productive and efficient. However, what I'm finding is, although tools like AI and other software tools could help them be more productive, efficient, they're so overwhelmed by the releases of all these new tools coming so fast. They all know how to use GPT at this point. When I say know how to use it, they know how to put something in, not necessarily how to properly prompt. But it's an overwhelmed kind of field. And you're working with students, entrepreneurs, and innovators, and you're a professor of AI. How do you recommend entrepreneurs that aren't sitting there in your class or with the Zucker Institute? What are a few things they could do in their respective businesses to slowly but surely figure out how to become more productive and efficient through these tools?
It's a question that actually brings everything full circle. If you're going to invest your physical time in order to become more efficient later, that's exactly what you need to do with these tools. And I will explain. As you had just mentioned, it's overwhelming. There are new tools popping up on a daily basis. What you need to do is invest your time into what tool is best used for you. And I say that because each AI tool does better in certain areas than in others. So there's the Bings, there's Gemini, there's Bard, there's ChatGPT, the list goes on and on. Each one does things better than the other. And so when you're investing your time and say, I am going to make a full commitment to using AI to make my business better, step one is figuring out which AI tools do I want to use to make myself better. And that is really just sitting down with these tools, becoming familiar with them. Each one has different buttons, different features, different privacy modes. Find out where your comfort zone is. It's very similar to figuring out which web browser you like to use. It's interesting to hear people. I just assume everyone uses the same web browser that I do. And it's very rare to find someone actually that does. Somewhat of the same premise. So I'd actually start there. Make sure you understand what you're using and which one you'd like to use the most.
Yeah, and I'm assuming also understanding what processes you feel you could eliminate or improve or be more productive in. One of the things I'm guessing from an ROI perspective, there's a huge ROI in companies getting an assistant, right? I heard one of the best definitions I heard is if you use AI properly, every one of your employees should have an employee, which is this tool called
Absolutely.
AI, right? So there's a lot of return on investment there to find the right tool. Do you have any experience? Obviously, what's interesting with you work with entrepreneurs, you can be their consultant or advisor in this area. But for businesses that don't have consultants or advisors in knowing all these different tools and knowledge out there, are you aware of services that just do that? They'll come into your company, assess everything you got going on, and try and help you find the right tools that apply for you versus the entrepreneur themselves trying to test all these tools at night while they're running their business?
In a way, I don't think we're there yet where someone has professionalized that. Sounds like a good business. I see it coming. What I would offer in that arena is the idea of workspace or enterprise level. And almost all of these more advanced AI tools have this. Workspace, for example, means you can include everyone that works in your company in your workspace. It's a closed working environment. And so what that means is at your company, any piece of information that's input into that AI tool is collected, put into a memory. And let's say you have a 25,000 person company. Let's say you have a 5-person company. It actually doesn't matter because the next time someone needs to create a PowerPoint presentation on topic A, you can tell, create me a PowerPoint presentation on topic A using all the information you have from everyone who's ever put anything into your system, and it will produce it in a matter of seconds. So that is the concept of workspace. And that has become exponentially helpful for smaller companies. When you start to reach a certain threshold, and those numbers are subjective, but then there's enterprise level, where now you start to incorporate the Microsofts of the world. And Microsoft actually already does this, where if you have OneDrive or SharePoint and your entire organization is run off of it, you can actually instruct the AI tool to pull from every email, OneDrive folder, SharePoint folder to create, again, let's call it a PowerPoint presentation on a specific topic. So rather than one brain working on that PowerPoint presentation, your assistant, that AI tool, is using all the information it has to create it for you.
Yeah, you almost got to your point, develop your own. You got to develop your own tool with your own proprietary information so you can query it, whether it be tomorrow or a year or 3 years from now, to pull all the resources that can be pulled out of it in an efficient manner. To start training your own private model versus the public model, maybe is the differentiation there too, right?
Yeah, in a way, you're right. And some companies are moving in that direction where they're creating their own AI tool. And back to my original point, are you creating an AI company tool, or are you just using AI to run your business? And some are doing both because it's to their benefit. But these larger companies, OpenAI, for example, was the first, I believe, to do it. They've opened up these workspace accounts, which immediately just give you that bubble to operate in.
Yeah, but I know there's some concerns on companies. Hey, all our company information, if our employees just start using their OpenAI account, they're getting all of our company's information. I don't want that out there. I want that to be proprietary. So that's what that workspace account comes into play. Makes
It
sense.
does. And actually, a good point to make on that, because I operate in that world, the Zucker Institute manages all intellectual property for MUSC. And we were very cautious and made sure that our workspace instance that we use is closed and not being used to train the model.
Yeah.
And so that is something very important, especially if you're in a legal environment, healthcare environment. You can turn that off. So it's not training the world, but rather just training your instance.
Yeah, that makes sense. The whole definition of these instances is very intriguing. And that whole futuristic view you gave us there a few minutes ago is really appealing, trying to figure out how to communicate between instances to figure out problems or figure out timing, schedules, or whatever. It seems like very exciting. So tell me a little bit. So at the Zucker Institute, as an example, what I'm seeing this as, and correct me if I'm understanding this correctly, it's part of a medical kind of connection there with the Medical University of Charleston. And so you're working with researchers who have ideas, have things they've developed, have things they've incubated in the lab, but they're not entrepreneurs, they're not business people. And you're helping them take those ideas into the business world. Is that a fair characterization of what you're doing with the Zucker Institute today?
You're absolutely right. And we work under the umbrella of the Medical University of South Carolina, more commonly known as MUSC. And the intellectual property at MUSC and any other research institution is set well in advance. So when you are hired or going to school or getting involved with the university on any level, it is understood that any idea you come up with while working or going to school there falls under the intellectual property and policy. My department, my organization, the Zucker Institute, we administer that IP policy. We take it quite a bit further. We're probably a little bit more down the road than most. They're called tech transfer offices. We are a true commercialization office. And so we triage the idea up front. We're not just issuing a patent for the sake of issuing a patent. In some cases, we're actually trying to find a reason why we shouldn't file a patent because it's either not buildable, not scalable, or someone's already done it. And yes, that is our true priority, is to get ideas from the idea stage through commercialization. And that can come in the form of a licensing deal, building a startup, or getting into a co-development with a larger company.
Okay. And the answer may be, hey, John, I can't share that information, which I completely understand. But is the Zucker Institute or the University there of South Carolina known for any IP that's out there in the world? Be like, oh, yeah, like they invented this. Is something we're proud of, or is that something you can't share?
We'd love to share that. Once it's out into the public, it's nothing that's proprietary. It is proprietary, but it's not secret. There's quite a bit. We don't have the Gatorade of the world out there, which actually came out of the University of Florida.
Okay.
But we do have well over 100 startups that have historically come out of the university. And as of late, we've recently been reorganized. We can confidently say we have around 50 to 55 startups that have come out. Probably nothing that's going to ring a bell publicly or nationally, but definitely influential in their own right. Our website actually lists some of those that are most successful and most prominent as of late. So I guess the answer to your question is we've definitely made an impact on this world, just probably not in the way of a household common name at this point.
Sure. Okay. And in terms of your capacity, in terms of trying to figure out the commercialization of this, right? So let's talk to your entrepreneurs who have this idea. They have this thing they have. And just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's going to make a great business. What are some of the key components that you look at to evaluate whether or not this idea, this product, this service, whatever it may be, has commercial viability?
That is a great question. And sometimes I forget that what seems like logical first step for me doesn't seem like a logical first step for most. And it goes way back. If you've ever taken an entry level business course, you start to truly understand who your demographic is. And so there's a couple basic pillars that we address right off the bat. Can it even be built? Has someone already come up with the idea? What is the total addressable market? And what is the serviceable addressable market? And if you just start there, it'll give you a really good picture to understand, is there really something here? Is there a there is something that we hear quite often in this office. And 9 out of 10 times the answer is no. It's a very hard message to deliver to someone who has poured their life into an idea and to somewhat say your baby is ugly. And it is something we have to do on a daily basis. But it's not a no and go away. It's a no, how do we pivot? What could we do differently? How could we attack the market differently? And so I would give all entrepreneurs the suggestion, don't build it and assume they will come. What you must do is poke holes in your idea so that you get to a point where you have no other option but to move it forward. Many times we are, especially when it's a tangible object and not something that's more idealistic, it's a screw or a piece of hardware. We really need to understand if it can actually be built. And when we ask someone, how many of these do you think you could sell? When the answer is a lot, we know there's something wrong there. We need to have a very specific number and know where and to whom and why.
You said early on in the conversation that you've had a few exits. What have you learned in the process of having had a few exits that you would offer to entrepreneurs who may be looking at their first exit?
It's okay to be okay. And I was not comfortable in one of my first exits. I always thought, am I exiting too soon? And that's usually a fear that a lot of entrepreneurs have is, do I really want to be exiting now? Am I missing out on what's next? Is there another investment opportunity coming in? And what I would suggest in an exit situation is evaluate what is best for you and your family at this snapshot in time. You can't predict the future. You can't go back into the past. But what you can do is make the best decision for yourself at this moment in time. If in 10 years you look back and all of a sudden your idea is quadrupling in its revenue, be proud of it. Don't be mad that you exited at that moment in time.
I want to double back on that AI topic one more time. What is the risk around AI? And the reason I ask is there's risk around anything. We could talk about how great having a car is and how fast you can go from point A to point B. And the risk is you get in an accident. We could talk about how great it is to teach our kids to swim. Now that you have a 2 and 5-year-old, yeah, we're teaching our kid to swim. The risk is that they dive in a pool and hit their head on the ground. What is the risk among all of the great things AI can provide? Where are the risks?
There's one glaring risk, and it borders on ethical considerations that are being debated right now around AI. And that is whether it should remain or be open sourced, or if it should be controlled by companies. It's a question that's much bigger than me. It's debated in Congress regularly. And the fear is, if it's actually more of a discussion, I shouldn't say fear, but it does strike fear. If it remains open source and everybody has access to it, it's unfiltered, and you can basically ask it to create a bomb if you wanted to. There's no filter to stop someone from getting the recipe to create literally a bomb. Now, on the other side of that coin is if we privatize it and we say AI can only be controlled by large organizations, we know what that implies also. That means that now what the output is from these AI tools is being filtered in some way, shape, or form, maybe not intentionally bad nor good, just being filtered. And when something is filtered, we know that can influence decisions exponentially. The fear right now that's being evoked in the public is which way do we go? And we have really smart people in this country reviewing that. The answer, I don't think, has been discovered yet. And I don't think it probably will for many years.
Joe, at a very interesting intersection. I love the story of starting in real estate, got out of real estate, and all of a sudden you find yourself in this other area of helping commercialize researchers' business, teaching AI at a college. And as you look forward into the future, we have entrepreneurs listening to this. What would be one message you have for them based on everything that you've learned in your body of work as an entrepreneur, now a professor, now an advisor, a speaker, a consultant? What would be that one message you'd have for entrepreneurs about the future and what they should be thinking about today?
Really start getting to understand as much as you can about as much as you can. I used to look at it as a detriment to myself to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. I actually, at one point in my career, thought that I should stop and really just focus in one very specific area. What I quickly realized is that I am where I am today because of that vast knowledge base. I actually also took on another title very recently. I am going to be the director of Blue Sky Labs, which is the first step in an innovation district being built at MUSC. This is where we're going to incubate companies and products in-house for the very first time ever, and that's going to evolve into an entire innovation district. I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I didn't have that real estate background, because I now understand some of the life science, how to start a business, and also how to lease space. So if I didn't have that master of none, but a jack of all trades mentality, I wouldn't be where I am today. So learn as much as you can about every aspect of what you're doing and the industry next door, because it can only be to your benefit later.
Yeah. And now with the tools to assist you, you can have that employee doing research for you to learn as much as you can about as much as you can. So I love that. Joe, how can people learn more or connect with you?
I am readily available and easy to connect with on just about every social media platform. I can be reached through the zuckerinnovation.org website. That'd probably be the easiest way to read my bio and get a quick link to my email address. Also on all the usual suspects, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. And LinkedIn probably would give you a much better story of who I am if you're interested in reading about my unique history.
Awesome. Thank you for your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Stay tuned as John and Rich unpack today's conversation.
John, you got into AI way before I certainly did. And I think you were on the leading edge of having talked about it, particularly on the podcast, since we'd started it. Had you heard of this act as make a product, and then in what capacity do you want it made? This is the first time I'm hearing that, and it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, not specifically that formula. No, I know I've used varieties of please give it to me this way. Explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old, or write this letter in an aggressive tone or a funny tone, or help me do this in a sentimental way, or whatever it may be. Like I've done some of that, but not specifically in the 1, 2, 3. Have it exactly like this. So I really love that format. And certainly we're hearing the same thing over and over again, which is, look, it may sound really weird, but you're actually having a conversation, and that person on the other side is there to please you. So if you're not happy with something, just tell them exactly what you're not happy with. And as a matter of fact, they'll probably apologize and say, oh, I apologize. Let me try this. And so it is a conversation. It is iterative, right? You got to keep going and going. But a thing that really dawned on me, this is one thing I'm not doing, Rich. And I guess I'm questioning whether I should or I shouldn't. I'm not really sure. I don't feel on a personal level or on a company level that we are intentionally, or I am intentionally training my instance to know everything it should know about me. So in the future, it can communicate on my behalf. I haven't really done that. I've been really ad hoc in terms of using this AI, using that AI, not really connected to my account. Maybe it is connected to my account. And maybe I need to be more intentional about that, not only with myself, but with our companies, to create this database that even if I put to private, where it's not being shared with the world, so I can train my own instance, so I can become maybe more powerful in the future in terms of my productivity and my communication skills with others and other things. So I guess I'm just throwing that out there for conversations. I'm assuming you've never really considered intentionally training your own instance either, correct?
No, but as I was just listening to you, it made me think for the first time. It's interesting that we create our own instances, if you will, and those instances are on Facebook. Those instances are on Instagram. Those instances are on LinkedIn. And I wonder if this is going to come about where one instance communicates with another when social media starts to use AI to have those instances communicate. Because most people
Yeah.
who have social media, like, what is it that you've trained more about who you are and who's in your life? And then add in facial recognition and where were you on what day and what were you excited about and what did you comment on? There's so much training of the social media instances. If that was turned on, communicate one to the other, be pretty interesting.
Yeah, but take it a different way, Rich. We work with entrepreneurs and leaders a lot, right? And you know that this conversation is going to have a transcript. It's going to say, John said this, Rich said that, right? Joe said this. We have a transcript. We are not taking that transcript intentionally and loading it into the Rich Hoffman instance and go, this is how Rich Hoffman thinks about these things. And this is what he says. I'm not taking content that I do. If I'm on a one-on-one coaching call with a client this afternoon, I'm not taking that transcript and saying, here's what John said regarding all these things and training my instance so that 5 years from now, somebody could say, what would John do in this situation? And he goes, boom, here's what John would do based on millions of hours of recordings and transcripts and everything else. I haven't trained a model. I haven't trained my own John St. Pierre instance. I've never really actually thought about training my own John St. Pierre instance until this conversation where I'm like, should I be? And maybe I need to bring Joe back on here and ask him, should we intentionally be training our own instance? From a company perspective, I think the answer is yes. From a personal perspective, I think the answer is yes, but it freaks me out.
I love where you just went. And specifically for you and I, but I think it applies to everybody for you and I to take the transcripts of these. If we could load those up in an instance, and at some point, if we wanted to know, hey, the guests that we've had, what are the top 5 things I should do to my LinkedIn profile to make sure that it is eye-catching and may create interest? And all of a sudden it comes up, and we've had probably, 3, 4 people who have talked about how to optimize LinkedIn profiles. I have notes. John, I'm on page 674 on my iPad. I can search by words, but sometimes my writing isn't as searchable as I'd like it to be. But I don't even remember the name right now of all the 3 or 4 people who have talked about LinkedIn, just as a random
I
example.
understand, Rich, but hold on. We have the transcript of every single conversation we have ever
I think we
had.
should load it up.
We can load it up and ask it, hey, what do you need to do? But take it to another degree, right? We're not going to be here forever. Let's go back to legacy. We talked about this in a prior episode. Imagine our kids asking us a question
Yeah.
that's respond my video avatar with exactly what I would
Yes.
say because I trained it on millions of pieces of information. Think how crazy this is. But yet
And you could project you as a hologram to your grandchildren's grandchildren and say, hey, Grandpa John, what would you do in this scenario?
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. But then take it a step further to helping entrepreneurs with their businesses or just being able to query all that information. So I'm going to make a commitment right here, right now. I am going to go train my own instance. I just feel if you don't, you're missing out on all of this thought that you may even just want to query yourself. Hey, like after all this information I've fed you about who I am, what should I do in this situation? What do you recommend I do? You know me best. No one has all millions of pieces of information about what I said in the past or done in the past. So I'm going to commit to doing that. I'm going to take it a step further, which is really investigating how my companies could be more effective and more productive by training their own instances as well. It's not something I've been intentional on in either aspect. And this conversation just slapped me across the head. And I'm like, what are you doing? You got to be on the game here.
I'll tell you another opportunity is to look at your favorite author that you believe that favorite author of yours, boy, everything they write, that's how I really like to run my business. They're a thought leader. If we could upload in the instance all of the books of that thought leader or multiple thought leaders,
Yep.
and ask it, hey, what would Pat Lencioni do in this scenario with a coaching client of mine? I think there's a fascinating opportunity to upload thought leaders who are not ourselves to be able to ask, what would they do in this scenario?
Sure. Just understand, though, that could be part of the learning language model that exists already out there today. Is you could ask them, what would Tony Robbins do in this situation? And it already is trained on Tony Robbins type of stuff. Doing it on your own company's information is a little bit different, right? The idea that he talked about to put out a presentation of all your company's information in this particular instance within seconds and as a PowerPoint that's ready to go.
I wonder though, could you ask, hey, here's a scenario. If you blend Adam Grant and Pat Lencioni, Dale Carnegie, what would they say? I've never done that. Have you ever done that and asked a blended?
I've never asked the blended question, Rich, but the answer is you're going to get an answer. It may not be factually accurate because sometimes the AIs just say, well, I don't even know who this person is, so I'm just going to make it up. They hallucinate, and that's one of the downfalls of AI. They're going to give you an answer. They're not going to say, sorry, I can't answer that question. They're going to give you an answer. But I have said, can you write a video or speech for me with a pumped up sound of Tony Robbins? So it's motivation and inspiring and lifting, and they'll absolutely do it. Now, how do I know whether it sounds like Tony Robbins or not? I don't know. But what I love about what Joe's talking about here is just the idea that learn as much as you can about as much as you can. And by the way, I think you and I both grew up a little bit as entrepreneurs about jack of all trades as well. And we've got specializations in a couple different areas, but now with these tools that are available out there, you can learn as much as you can about as much as you can, including yourself. And that's the part that kind of is really an aha moment for me in this conversation. And even querying, we were talking about commercializing a business. And he talked about all the different things you should ask before commercializing a business. What are some of those pillars? Can it be built? Is this scalable? What's the addressable market? What's the serviceable addressable market? All of those things you can query. It's available. You got to put it together. But most entrepreneurs just launch this shiny object because they think it's going to work, and they don't query, they don't research, and the research tools are there and available for you to go use. And that to me is fascinating.